I'm not expecting a lot of our semi-regulars tonight. I don't know if I didn't like promote it enough, or if just the consequences of life happened. But I fully intend to make this a crazy show, even if I'm just one, on my own banging pots and pans or something. But
I guess we're the only two losers who didn't have anything to do this Saturday night.
Hey, man, you don't understand. My boss asked me if I could work tomorrow on what's my usual day off. I am glad to have this 10-hour stream as an excuse. I planned it. I semi-planned it weeks in advance. I just said, hey, I'll do a 10-hour stream. And I've been trying to organize so many guests coming in that I can barely keep track of it. I've probably forgotten a few, so anybody could pop in tonight. Like probably some people you thought would never be on this show ever. Of course, on the opposite side, other things could come up, and it could just be with me for a while and then me by myself for all I know. I don't know, but we'll see. It could, I intend for it to be a crazy night one way or another. So we actually have another interview coming up here shortly. But before we do that, what's going on? What's on your mind?
Not much on my mind, really. Right now I'm saying goodbye to 2020 by drinking some MD 2020.
2020 what?
MD 2020.
Which is what, whiskey, vodka? I don't.
Ghetto wine.
Well, like, did you know that they can make wine in prison?
Yeah, Pruno.
Yeah, Pruno, exactly. And they keep it in a little Ziploc bag, and I don't know if they tape it under the toilet lid or something. This shit's disgusting.
Yeah, well, you got to do what you got to do when you're behind bars.
Do you got to do that, though? I mean, is it that? I mean, that sounds like a very dirty, way to get intoxicated. But
they do all sorts of filthy shit, like getting prison tattoos where, you probably catch AIDS if you try to do that.
Yeah. Jeez. So, I mean, are you releasing anything here anytime soon?
I mean, nothing planned. Like, I have a press that's interested in my plays, and I have one manuscript with a prior publisher of mine, but nothing is set.
Right on. Now, I do expect Gregor to be along shortly. What I'm realizing the more more time goes on, is that Zach and I are like oil and water, and in a way, in a way I hate to see him go, but in another way, it's like he would make plans and then backpedal on them. Did I ever mention that I hate it when people do that?
All the time.
Does anybody like it when people make plans and then backpedal on them?
No, but I kind of expect it to happen.
I do too. That's why I don't make plans anymore. Hello, Mr. Beckett.
Hi there. How are you?
Hey.
It's an honor to speak with you. Beneath the World, a Sea was on the in my year-end list, and it's a major feat, an accomplishment in literature. You wrote this. When did you write this?
Let's see. It was. It came out in 2019, so I must have written it. Sort of early 2019, late 2018. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So to sum up the plot, would you want to do it, or a British police officer is sent to do a large scale, I don't know, welfare check, or to investigate, how endangered these duende creatures are in a place called the Submundo. Am I butchering it?
No, that's right. So the premise of the book, the thing you've got to suspend disbelief for, is the idea that somewhere in South America there's a place called the Submundo, which is quite different from anywhere on Earth, and is inhabited by essentially alien creatures, as you might find on an alien planet. And there are human inhabitants of the Submundo who've been sort of very poor sort of peasant type people who've been dumped there a century ago, and they live in this strange forest that grows there. And they're in a kind of state of conflict with the indigenous alien population of the area who are called duendes, and kill them on a regular basis. And the policeman is there to investigate these killings, really.
And the monoliths that they build, or these structures that they build out of what, like sticks, mud, dirt.
I don't know what they build them out of. They resemble something that probably resemble a bit more like seashells, but they're very delicate structures, very complicated structures which they build, which people don't know what they're for. But the locals, the human beings who live there and have lived there for a century and a half, are called the Mundinos, and they regularly smash up these structures. They regard the duendes as something resembling evil spirits. And the duendes have this strange ability to access people's minds and kind of release uncomfortable memories and emotions in their minds, so that they're very uncomfortable creatures to be near, and completely inscrutable.
And the locals sell little plush dolls of them in gift shops. It's a tourist attraction in a way, right?
Well, yeah, it's a bit of a niche tourist attraction. Not many people get there. It's quite a difficult journey to get there. But there are two sets of locals. There are the people who've been there for some time, the Mundinos, who live in small villages in the forest. The forest itself it's completely unlike a terrestrial forest you'd find anywhere else. And it also has mind-altering qualities as well. But they live out there trying to keep the duendes at bay. There's also a kind of rock in the middle of the submundo on which a more recent population lives, more modern type of town with scientists and administrators and so forth.
And I seem to remember some kind of wildlife that I don't remember if you call them. I guess I imagined like flying stingrays. I don't know. I thought the word ray was in the title.
Indeed, there are flying things, animals rather like flying stingrays. There are also another kind of animal which are known as bluebirds, and they're not very similar to birds. They have teeth, and they operate very much in a sort of high sort of. They seem to have some kind of hive mind thing going. They operate as a flock altogether. There are various other strange creatures. No one knows how these creatures got there. No one knows why they're confined to the submundo. Some people think maybe they arrived from an alien planet. Though the alternative suggestion is put by one resident of the area that they're the last remainders of the original population of the Earth, and that the rest of life on Earth came from an alien planet. Whatever happened, whatever, they're completely different and unrelated to the life on the rest of the Earth. Because it's an odd thing, really, that as far as we know, life only evolved once on the Earth. That in the non-fictional world, there is only all life on Earth is related. And it struck me when I was writing the book, why is that? Why wouldn't there be a second evolution that's completely unrelated to the rest of life on Earth? And that's what I was playing with, really.
This is some incredible world building going on. And, one of my other co-hosts who is probably, you'll probably miss him, by the time he gets here, but he actually added on his year-end best of list as well. It's a lot of world building, and it's a nice little bestiary that you've created here. And I was never really able to be compelled to the side that these creatures were benevolent or malevolent. And I love the way you made them. You just upped the mystery quotient to such a degree that their motives are nearly impossible to decipher.
Yes. I sometimes I think a book can be, conventionally, I suppose, a science fiction type novel ends up with the mystery being resolved. And I sometimes feel rather disappointed by that. Sometimes it's quite nice to have the mystery remain. And I think the thing about the duendes is although human beings do speculate about how they operate and what their motives are, nobody can really tell. They don't communicate. I mean, just to explain, the duendes are vaguely humanoid-shaped creatures. They don't look very like people, but they have sort of arms and legs and a head. They have black, round, button-shaped eyes, and they have a sort of what looks like a permanent grin. But they don't speak. They don't make any noise at all. And if you're walking through the forest is sort of magenta coloured. It's not green; it's magenta coloured, and it's punctuated by. It's not really a forest, actually. It's a kind of almost more like a mangrove with a sort of carpet of roots on which you walk, and beneath the surface of it, it's water. And from time to time, there is a pool through which the water is visible among the trees, you see what I mean? So it's like a wooden floor almost with pools in it. And these duendes emerge at night from the pool. So do the other creatures. Most of the creatures live under the forest in the water in the daytime. At night, they emerge from the pools. And the duendes come out usually at night. And human beings, if you come across them, they don't try and communicate with you or interact with you, but you feel very uncomfortable. They make you feel uncomfortable the closer you get to them. And if you're very close to them, they completely scramble your thoughts. It's impossible to think straight in their presence. They do something to your mind. Nobody knows how. And nobody knows why either. I mean, they've been, as far as people know, they've been there for millions of years. It's not like they've always been interacting with humans, but the fact is they have this effect on humans when you go near them. And the book is about how people deal with these creatures and the effect they have on you, and speculate about their relationship with each other and with the forest. Our policeman soon loses the thread of what he's there to do. It just becomes drawn into the forest, which kind of unlocks something in him in some kind of strange way. There are a number of other characters who've also, in various ways, been sucked into this, and it's about their interactions as well.
And one character actually tries to keep a journal, to document their time. I believe so they won't forget, but eventually, they're so enamored with the surroundings in the submundo that they lose more and more time, and they lose interest in documenting anything in the journal at all as time goes on. So it has a very forceful effect on people's minds once they're in that territory. Anybody who thinks they can outsmart it, it's not happening generally.
No, it's very, very powerful, whatever it is going on there. And people do forget the outside world when they're in there. But there's also a region on the outskirt, around the outside of the submundo, the region that they call it's known as the zona of forgetfulness, where you literally, when you pass through the zone, once you come out the other side of the zone, you can't remember anything you did when you were in it. So you pass through this zone to get into the submundo, and this creates another whole set of strange experiences that you can imagine. If there was a place you could walk into, and when you were there, you would be able to see and hear, and you'd feel like yourself. But you knew in advance that when you came out of it, you wouldn't remember anything you did there. What would you do? That's the question I want the reader to ask. What would you do if there's a place where you could walk into and do what you like, and then come out and not remember anything you did? That's one of the features of the submundo, this strange region that surrounds it. So the whole region is deeply unsettling to human beings. The sort of longest human inhabitants there, the Mundino people, a wealthy aristocrat in the previous century has decided to deposit a bunch of people in the forest, in the submundo forest. He bribed them to go there, freed slaves, peasants with no land, and they've lived. They were just dropped there, and they had no idea where they were. They imagined that they'd fallen out of the world altogether into some kind of underworld. That's why it's called the submundo. It really means the underworld. Until more humans arrived, and they developed an entire kind of mythology about this place. But they've also, in some ways, adapted to the strange psychic forces, whereas people like the policeman, Ben, he's not adapted to it. It's overwhelming for him when he comes in. But it's also almost addictive, like a drug. And it kind of sucks him in and makes him lose any sense of his purpose or who he is almost as time goes on. And it has that similar effect on other people. So it's a strange place, and I just had a lot of fun inventing a very strange place, really.
Yeah, and I wonder if this were such a place. But I mean, in the case of the story that it exists in, how many people, if they could go into this zone and do whatever they wanted and not remember it, how many people would not do something incredibly, volatile, evil, nefarious, or in violation of the social contract in general? I mean, how many people would actually do something noble, that they couldn't remember, as opposed to something extremely nasty? I think most of the time it would be unlocking their most, heinous inner desires, right?
Well, I mean, I guess some people it wouldn't, but my feeling was that a lot of us don't do, people, to some extent anyway, there are things we would do if we didn't think we'd be punished for it and we didn't think we'd have to feel ashamed about it afterwards. I mean, I guess it's a lot of things many people would have in their mind, something that they wouldn't mind doing if they knew there would be no consequences and they wouldn't have to feel any kind of shame or guilt afterwards. And that is what this area, the Zona, offers. You could go in there and you could do something. But what again, the book leaves it pretty vague what people might get up to. I mean, there are brothels and gambling dens and things there. We know that. And I guess that's something that kind of thing as people could do. But what else could they do? And the policeman, he's passed through the Zona in order to get to the submundo. And he's kept a diary. He did keep a diary while he abandoned it eventually, but he kept a diary when he was inside the Zona. And his former self almost teases him by saying, "You don't know what I'm getting up." Teases its future self by saying, "You don't know what I've got up to, do you? You have no idea what I've got up to while I'm here." And so he's frightened. He's done something terrible when he's in the zone. He doesn't know what. He committed some crime, maybe a murder or something, and he just doesn't know. How would you know? So that's another thing. So I guess in a way, the whole book is partly about, or playing, not about so much, but plays around with the idea of the subconscious. The part of ourselves that we don't know. And this is a place which, in various ways, taps into your subconscious.
Yeah, and so it takes place in 1990, correct?
Yeah, when I started writing this book, I considered setting it in the future on another planet. It's a conventional science fictional setting. And I don't know why that didn't come alive for me. And I suddenly thought, well, let's do the opposite of that. Let's set it on Earth, and let's just say, to hell with it. The reader can cope with an imaginary place on Earth. Why not? Why is that any more difficult to get your head around than an imaginary planet? And you reach it by boat, really, rather than going through a kind of winding system of rivers, rather than going through space. And I thought, why not set it in the past? So I set it in 1990. Why in 1990 particularly? Well, the protagonist is in his 30s, and I was in my 30s in the 90s. So I thought I would make the protagonist he would be the same age as the year would be when I was the same age as the main protagonist. That was the only reason I picked that. I also for various reasons, thought it'd be fun to set it in a world before mobile phones and so on. So that's another reason why I picked 1990. But so yeah, I set it on it's a kind of alien encounter story, but it's set on this world and in the past, for those reasons.
It's a much more personal kind of Bermuda Triangle. Yeah, the officer in this book. Would you say that a lot of your experiences as a social worker went into writing his chapters?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think some of my other books more obviously draw on my experience as a social worker. But I suppose he's a police officer, not a social worker. But he has in the outside world, he's quite an upright sort of man who has a strong sense of doing the right thing and being responsible and doing his duty and so forth, which I suppose is sort of thing that draws people into social work as well. But he's quite a bottled up kind of guy. He's a guy that doesn't know himself very well, if you know what I mean. He's so do you know that kind of person who's so given over to saying the right thing and doing the right thing that they've never stopped to notice who they really are, and I think that's how I describe him. There's another character he meets in the Zona jail, who's a kind of genius, almost a genius level scientist, who's kind of taken the Zona in a completely different level. She's kind of given herself over, not the Zona, the Submundo. She's kind of given herself over to it, and is just embracing it, and her boyfriend Rico is gradually almost turning into a duende himself. He's just completely immersed in it, and they are not hampered by Ben's sense of duty and moral codes and so forth. But I suppose the book leaves open the fact that actually, because he doesn't know himself very well, Ben may actually may do things that are worse than these other characters do. He just doesn't know it.
Your background in education is downright intimidating. You went to a place called the Dragon School, which that title alone is amazing.
Yes, it sounds a bit like Hogwarts, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Did they teach you how to be a dragon there?
Yeah, that's right. They teach you how to be a dragon. Yeah. No. Well, it's a private school in Oxford. I come from a kind of professional middle class background. My parents sent me to private schools. I think that's something that happens a bit more often in England than it does in America, I think, the private school system. But slightly more people use it in England, I think, than they do in America. And so, yeah, the Dragon School was yeah, I mean, it does sound a very unlikely name for a school, I know. And I wish I could tell you they trained me to be a dragon. And then I went to a boarding school in another part of England for my secondary school, at the age of 13, for the rest of my schooling. So that was my background.
An honor in psychology.
And then I studied psychology at university. That's right, and I guess you can see some of my psychological education in this book. I guess in some ways, as I say, it's a kind of study, or not studies are a pretentious word. It plays with the idea of the subconscious, as I say, which I obviously and certainly that idea comes from Sigmund Freud and so forth, and I guess I'm aware of that debt, and I suppose in Freud's idea, the unconscious is sort of below the surface, and in this world, the duendes and the other creatures mainly live beneath the forest, unseen to humans. But at night they come up through the pools. Rather like at night, our subconscious is supposed to emerge in dreams. So I suppose that idea was in the back of my mind. I mean, I wasn't trying to write some kind of allegory. It's just that these things are knocking around in your mind, and you draw on them, don't you, when you're writing a book? So yeah, so if you walk through the forest in in the forest in the submundo during the daytime, it's almost silent, almost completely silent, apart from the sound of wind and so forth. It's kind of magenta trees and sort of spiral structures. And actually, it's silent at night, actually, because none of the animals make a noise. But if you walk through it at night, you will come across strange creatures emerging from the pools and kind of sneaking off into the forest. All kinds of strange creatures. Some of them vaguely resemble animals you find elsewhere. Some of them are just completely unlike anything you'd find elsewhere. I wanted it to have a kind of eerie, unearthly feel to it, but without making it into either an evil place or a good place. It's just a place that's uncanny because it's unfathomable and unfathomable. Can't say that word, you know what I mean? Unfathomable. And it kind of stays that way, but the characters develop in the course of the story, I hope, and we see them changing as a result of their interaction with one another and with the world. But we don't reach a resolution about what kind of world it is. People are free to speculate about that.
Your description of it reminds me a little bit of Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation. Was that an influence at all?
I'm afraid to say I've never read it, so perhaps I should, but no, it wasn't an influence. I think if I was trying to think about the most obvious influence on me was some of Ballard's early books, such as The Crystal World and The Drowned World. Sorry, is it The Crystal? Yeah, it is called The Crystal World, isn't it? And The Drowned World. Some of his early books certainly had more of an influence on me. I think probably that would be the most obvious influence. There are all kinds of bits and pieces in there, I think. But J.G. Ballard's early books are probably the most obvious one. Yeah.
Oh, Ballard comes up a lot on this show. A lot of people swear by Ballard.
Yeah. Well, he's an interesting writer in the sense that he's very good at creating a mood and an atmosphere, but his stories are very his books are very I always think they're very static. They're like a painting, it's like there's not much plot in them. He just builds up like a painter, gradually adding detail to a canvas. Interesting books, but I think I'm a big admirer of Ballard. He's one of my favorite writers, and particularly particularly admire him as a short story writer as well. I'm also a big admirer of Philip K. Dick, but I'm not sure he's such an influence on this book. Particularly, most of his books take place in more urban settings, don't they? For one thing.
What would you say is your favorite Philip K. Dick novel?
Oh, now I think it depends what day you ask me, but I think I quite often say The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. I think so. Which is, and I guess maybe I do tap into some of that uncanniness that comes from that book as well, because we don't know what has happened to Palmer Eldritch, do we? We just know he's come back to Earth completely transformed by some kind of encounter he's had in another star system, and it doesn't. We don't have it all set out and explained for us. And I suppose that I think actually, now I'm talking to you, I think that was an influence on this book. So that's one of my favorites. But of course, To Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I love that. Flow My Tears, the policeman said. Some days I'll pick that as my favorite. So it just depends what day you ask me, really. Also, Philip Dick, a great short story writer, of course, as well, which I once wrote a whole dissertation on one of Philip Dick's stories.
How about the Galactic Pot Healer? That one's pretty wild, right?
That's pretty weird, isn't it? Yeah, and I like that one too. That's a pretty bizarre. Yeah.
And what was the one where he was playing cards with like mind reading aliens, and so he had to do some sort of weird mind trick in order to successfully play his hand? I think that might have been in Solar Lottery. You know what I mean?
I never read Solar. I must have read 15 of his books, but I think he's written more than 40 books, and I haven't read all of them. But I've not read Solar Lottery, so I don't know. I don't know if it was that one. The card trick one isn't immediately connecting with me, but I'm trying to think of my other favourites. There's oh well, pass on, but I can come back to it. He was pretty prolific, wasn't he? I think I think it was a year he wrote 3 novels in 1 year, which is quite something.
Wow. Well, what about your other books? Because I'm sorry to say that I haven't read more of your work, although I intend to now. This was my first exposure to you. What about The Holy Machine? That was written before how many years ago?
Well, the Holy Machine was actually originally written. I originally finished that book in 1997, so a long time ago. But and it was published actually originally published by a small press in America, whose name has just escaped me for a minute, but it'll come back to me. Wildside Press. It didn't sell very many copies, but I had a short story collection which won a prize here in England and got me a bit of attention, and as a result I secured a sort of book deal, which meant that The Holy Machine was republished in England in a more professional form in 2010. So that's when it came out in its, if you like, commercial paperback format. The Holy Machine is my first novel. I think if you like Beneath the World is a Sea, I would suggest the next book you read is Dark Eden, which is the most similar to it in terms of, if you like, lavish invention, if I put it that way. Dark Eden, which has 2 sequels as well. But Dark Eden is that's set on a world with no sun. Human beings are stranded on a world that has no sun. It has geothermal heat, and it has bioluminescent life forms, but it has no sun, so it's always dark, and the only light comes from luminous trees and so forth. So it has
mentions lantern trees. Is that part of the
right, lantern trees? That's right. Yeah. And there's a small community of humans that have been stranded there, and as far as they know, no one on Earth even knows they're there. So they're stranded there, and they've reverted to a kind of Stone Age lifestyle in this strange environment. And it's about that, really. This is Dark Eden is my most successful book. It was the winner of the Arthur C. Clarke Award in 2012, I think it was. Which is our top science fiction prize in the UK, as you probably know. So I'm very proud of it. And then it had 2 sequels, Mother of Eden and Daughter of Eden, which was set in the same world, but they were both set 150 years later. I say 150 years, they don't have, of course, on Eden has no years, I think, as it has no sun, but the equivalent to 150 years later.
How do they count time if there is no down?
Well, they have 2 ways of doing it. Some of them, the traditionalists, attempt to maintain the idea of years. So there's a certain group of old men and women who count the number of times they wake and sleep, and every 365 wakings, that they call them wakings, they call a year. That's a traditional way of measuring it. But they also use human biological cycles as a way of measuring time. So the more modern way, if you like, modern, if I can call it that way, another way they measure time is what they call womb times, which is a human gestation period they use as a measure of time. So 9 months is the sort of basic unit of time in Eden. But basically they measure time in wakings and sleepings, as they call them, which, as you can imagine, each group of people more or less are in sync in terms of when they wake and sleep. But there's no reason why another group would be in sync, because as far as Eden's concerned, it's unchanging. So I had a lot of fun inventing that world. And if you enjoy the world building aspect of Beneath the World of Sea, I think you would definitely enjoy Dark Eden, which is certainly, or the 3 Eden books, which is definitely my biggest and most ambitious piece of world building. And it's more elaborate than Beneath the World of Sea in terms of world building. and I'm very proud of it, and I think you'd like it.
It's already on my Kindle. But
Excellent.
the 532 members of the family on this sunless planet, are they? Did they migrate there, or are they from a previous generation that migrated there?
What happened? What happened is that a spacecraft from Earth, which was damaged, stumbled upon this sunless planet against all the odds and landed there. And the spacecraft was very badly damaged, and there was some doubt as to whether it would ever get back to Earth. And there were 5 people on the craft, and 3 of them decided to go back to Earth, and nothing was heard of them ever after.
Mm.
That's the position at the beginning of Dark Eden. But the remaining 2 was a man and a woman, and they just stayed behind. So they became, an old science fiction trope. Obviously, they became the Adam and Eve of Eden, so all the people on Eden, without exception, are descended from these 2 human beings. And so you can imagine they obviously have a lot of genetic problems. They're extremely inbred. There's a lot of physical deformities and so forth, because they're all descended from the same 2 individuals. Some biologist friends have told me it would be much worse than I describe in terms of inbreeding, and might not, and probably wouldn't be viable at all. Others have said we just don't know. So I decided just to go with it. How you sometimes do. You just think, well, I'm just going to go with it. I don't care. I don't care if it's plausible or not. It works for me.
When they say it would be much worse, what exactly do they mean?
I think they mean that after a generation or 2, it would become so inbred, and people would be so badly genetically suffer so many serious genetic deformities and so forth, that they would not be a viable population at all. That's what they mean.
Hills have eyes.
But but I think, I don't know. I mean, you hear of animal populations building up from very small numbers, don't you? So I decided I was going to go with it. So you got these 532 at the beginning of the book, people all descended from the same people, the same 2 individuals who they revere now. Their ancestors, Tommy and Angela, they revere, perhaps not as gods, but they're beginning to get an almost godlike status in people's minds. Particularly Angela, the mother, they usually call her Jella, who, as the 3 books progress, she becomes increasingly a kind of deity. Although the society becomes increasingly patriarchal as well during that time. So that's interesting that they... and what I liked about this book was this trilogy was that I could write because it gave me a massive canvas to think about how human societies evolve and change, and how they make sense of their situation. So there's a lot of thought went into the stories they tell about themselves, because they've lost, they're more or less functioning at a kind of Stone Age level. Some of them can write in a very basic way, scratch things on trees and so forth, but they use tools they make with sticks and stones. They dress in animal skins. Their memory of the past is getting very garbled. Their memory and their idea of what it's like on Earth is getting very garbled. But they sorry,
kind of like crossing into the zone. The same effect, right?
In a way, yes, but I think it's an effect that happens on Earth all the time. That people, we do forget the past fairly rapidly. I mean, I don't know how much you know about your great grandparents or your great great grandparents, but
true.
Yeah, I get pretty cloudy after I think I could tell you the names of my great grandparents, most of them, but that's about as far as it goes. And before that, I don't know the names, or I don't know much about them at all. So that's just how life is, I think, in a way. And you have societies all over the world that don't know how they got there. For example, the people who live in Madagascar, they apparently, from their language, we know they came from Borneo originally, but nobody knows how they got there, and they have no memory of that. So it's like that. Yeah. Anyway, that's the book that's most similar to Beneath the World of Sea in sense that it's a very strange alien world. My other books less so. They're more kind of near future kind of worlds, you know. Um, so I mix it up a bit.
Ben, do you have anything?
I don't really have anything, but the Dark Eden, Dark Eden series sounds really fascinating. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, please do. I hope you enjoy it. Yeah,
The
yeah,
covers to your books are always so explosively colorful. It's like
yeah,
eye popping, you know.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
always use the same artist?
Well, the American cover you got on the screen there is lovely. It's actually, I don't know the name of this artist, but it's a different cover in the UK. In fact, it's been through several different covers in the UK. But all my current UK covers are by the same guy, and I really like them. I must say, I thought the cover he did on Beneath the World of Sea was lovely. I think, and I've got this theory that the cover of a book makes quite a lot of difference to how you read it. Don't you think? You know, because for example, you look at that cover in front of us now, it's quite striking, and those colours are in your mind as you start to read the book, aren't they? And they sort of shape the way you read it, I think, in a way. So, yeah, I thought it was a great cover, that American cover. Yeah.
Definitely. You said that you won the Arthur C. Clarke Award. Have you ever had the distinction of having the Philip K. Dick Award for?
No, that would be that'd be the icing on the cake for me, but I haven't. No, the Arthur C. Clarke. I've won the Arthur C. Clarke Award, and I previously won an award for a short story collection, another British award, and that wasn't even a science fiction award. It's just an award for short stories. But I'm afraid the Arthur C. Clarke Award is the only science fiction award I've so far run. Well, I say I'm afraid, I'm quite happy with it, you know, but.
Oh yeah.
But the Philip Dick Award would be great, or you know, but yeah, because I'm. But we'll see. We'll see.
Judging by judging by the synopsis, America City sounds like you're very concerned about climate change. Do you
yes.
see it hitting fast and furious when it does? I mean, do you think it's already happening?
I think it's starting to roll forward, isn't it? I think more and more quickly. And I wanted to write. I've got a friend actually who is a climate scientist, and I was having quite a few conversations with him about it, and I suddenly felt, I write about the future. I really ought to write a book that just deals head on with the effects of climate change. So I wrote this novel, America City, which is entirely set in North America, and the premise of this book is that perhaps in about 100 years' time, the climate change is such that the southern states of America are really quite adversely affected by climate change. And down in the southeast, very powerful hurricanes are a very frequent event. For example, down in the southwest, drought is a really big problem, and some towns and areas of farmland have just had to be abandoned because there just isn't enough water. And so what's happening is there's a kind of migration problem within the United States. There's people from southern states are migrating en masse towards the north. And this is causing frictions within the United States. And some of the northern states are talking about actually introducing frontiers to stop people from other states coming into the area.
Oh, you mean borders?
Yeah, borders. Actually, states are actually introducing actual borders. Yeah, that's what's happening. And there's a lot of increasingly hostile attitude from people in the north towards people in the south. They call them dusties, or storm trash. You know, they have various names for people who come from the southern states. The book describes a very charismatic politician called Senator Slaymaker, who runs for president, and he's assisted by a young British woman who's a sort of PR expert, who kind of manages his communications on the campaign, and his aim is to unite the country. But in doing so, he as so many leaders do, he unites America by directing America's anger against other countries. And I'm not going to tell you the rest of the story because I don't want to spoil it, but it's about the consequences of that and how that plays out. They make a kind of Faustian bargain, and it plays out in a way that wasn't originally intended. Suffice to say, there's a lot of empty land to the north of America.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty powerful image of only the torch of Lady Liberty, being above, water.
Yes.
The rest is she's basically, head below water. She's
Yes,
sinking.
I mean that's a bit of poetic license. The book doesn't suggest that the floods are so high that they would that the water level is so high at that point that it would flood the Statue of Liberty. But it's a bit of poetic license. Also, a bit of a nod to Planet of the Apes, don't you think? But but yeah, there is a problem of flooding. There is a problem of storms, and the story is mainly told through the viewpoint of the young British publicist who's called Holly, and her husband. But I also have sort of little vignettes of minor characters, one of whom is a refugee from perhaps from Louisiana or that kind of area. I don't specify the place. I mean, actually, I was actually thinking about when the hurricane flooded New Orleans a few years ago. And I read a book about that, and I was very struck by what happened there, and the kind of the way that played out over the rest of the country over time. That for people were very generous, and but also very suspicious after a while of the refugees from New Orleans, and so I tried to incorporate those thoughts in this book,
reading about the Dust Bowl or anything, was that an influence?
And also the Dust Bowl, of course, as well, and the fact that Okies, my idea of Dusties was like thinking about when people used to be called Okies, and that was a pejorative, what's the word, a pejorative name essentially for climate refugees. And what I was thinking about is the way human beings are very good at when we feel our own interests are threatened by someone else, we're very good at turning them into bad guys that we don't have to care about, and othering them, and that's what's going on in this book, really. So that's what I was. Oh, there you are! I can see you here. So that's what I was writing about there. So it's a kind of book about. It's not really a book about technology or anything like that. It's a book about how societies function in times of adversity. And I was a bit cheeky, right, taking it to America, because I don't know America very well, but I've only been to America once. But I decided to. I felt we're exposed to things from America all the time, so we feel we know America, even if we've never been here, of course. Because of the dominant position America has in the world.
All right. What are you working on right now, or has everything that's been going on kind of put a damper on your creativity?
Well, right this minute, or this last month or so, I've been feeling a bit at a loss. But during from March through to when was it to June in this country, we had a national lockdown. Basically meant you couldn't see anybody. I don't know exactly how it's working in America, but you basically couldn't see anybody outside your own home except in the street. And a lot of people weren't going to work. Kids weren't going to school. It was all very strange. And during that period, I sat down and I wrote a rather strange novel, which is called Tomorrow, which I suppose you might see some similarities with Beneath the World of Sea. It has some similarities in terms of setting. But the novel is about a character who sits down to write a novel, and various things happen to him, so he never actually gets to write it, or he or she never gets to write it. Yeah. We don't know much about the character, but it's called Tomorrow. It's coming out in the summer.
That makes me think of Malmsberg.
I'm sorry.
That makes me think of Barry Malzberg. He did that a lot. Have like characters who, talk about wanting to write novels and having a lot of distorted perspectives that you don't know whether it's from the novel they're writing or from the character themselves.
It's that kind of thing, yeah. It's that kind of idea, yeah. It was a funny thing actually, because I actually said to my wife one evening, I'm going to sit down and I've really been prevaricating for a long time. I'm going to sit down tomorrow and start writing my novel. And she said that would be quite a good first line. She said, I'm going to start writing my novel. So, I always do what my wife said. The next day I started up. I was right tomorrow. The first line was tomorrow I'm going to start writing my novel. And I just went from there and I wrote the whole thing very quickly, 6 weeks. It took me to write the whole novel. The first draft of the whole novel, which is very fast for me. And it's kind of an experiment, actually. It's a bit different from anything I've done before, but I'm quite pleased with it. Yeah, it kind of jumps backwards and forwards in time. So we almost have the span of the narrator's whole life, but we know very little about the narrator. We never find out what their name is, or very little about them. Yeah.
The guy who wrote, maybe it was Something Happened, or maybe it was Joseph Hiller of Catch-22.
Oh yes, yeah. Yes, he wrote that, yeah. I've not read it though. I've only read Catch-22, yeah. Was that the same kind of idea, was it?
Well, what I was going to say is that he had not written anything for a very long time, and someone inquired about what he was working on, and he said, well, it's about this guy who gets up and goes to his job, and then he comes home, to his wife, and I don't really know anything else about him. And he wrote on it. He wrote that book for like several years. I almost feel like he must have been method writing to try to discover a story with that character.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that happening?
Just writing until something emerges. You mean? Well, that's essentially what I did with this new book. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a plot. I didn't have any idea what was going to happen. I just sat down and wrote. But it's a funny thing. I don't know if other writers are different, but I don't know how to generate ideas. I don't know how to make myself have ideas. So sometimes it's a bit scary. If I'm going through a period like the moment, the last couple of months, I haven't really had any ideas. And it's like, you kind of start to think, well, I'm never going to have another idea. And then sooner or later something comes up. But it's a very, I don't really know how to make them come. But I suppose, some people, one way to do it is just to write until something comes alive. And that is how I often do it. I just sit and write a lot of rubbish. And eventually I think, that is rubbish. But if I told it this way, it might work. And then suddenly, bam, it comes alive, and that you kind of live for those moments because that feels fantastic when it finally comes alive. But it's a horrible job until that happens, waiting for something to happen.
Well, I have a problem with the concept of the elevator pitch. It's fun in theory, but I think that you're so caught up in trying to wow the person you're pitching a story to that you may not be able to pull it off when you actually get down to brass tacks and actually try to write it. And I've noticed that happens a lot because I have been witness to a lot of people pitching, stories and novels to other writers, to editors and publishers, like at conventions and stuff. And a lot of times either it ends up totally different, they never write it. Elevator pitches are only workable in theory, I believe, unless they're a true professional.
Yeah, I couldn't. I'm glad I don't have to do an elevator pitch for my books because I would be useless at it. It's like, Beneath the World of Sea, which we were talking about at the beginning. I mean, that book emerged after a very long process of trial and error, and eventually I found out a way of telling it. As I said, it was going to be a conventional science fiction setting on a different planet to start with, and it's going to be set in the future and so forth. And I just couldn't make that come alive. And I said, so if I'd had to sort of wow somebody with a kind of 2-minute elevator pitch about what it was all about, I certainly wouldn't have succeeded. But, I think at the end result, I'm proud of. But even now, I'm not sure I could summarize I could make you think, oh, yeah, this is definitely the book to read in the course of an elevator ride. I think that'd be quite difficult.
It would be difficult to do it justice. Yeah.
I think so. I think it'd be difficult to. I couldn't do it. Maybe some people could. I don't know. I don't think I could. Maybe I'm just too long-winded.
All right. Did you have anything that you wanted to close out with? I think I got everything I was hoping for out of this, and it was very informative. And certainly, I appreciate you gracing us with your presence. Like I said, this will go down as one of my favorite, books ever, and that's no embellishing. So,
well, I'm very honoured by that, and I much appreciate you telling me that. I mean, the nice thing when you're a writer, you really want people to connect with what you're doing. So if somebody does, that makes it all worthwhile. So thank you so much. That's really kind of you, and it's been an honour to be on your program, on your podcast. And no, I can't think of anything else to say, except that if you like Beneath the World of Sea, I think Dark Eden is your next one to go for, and then see where you go from there. And let me know what you think about it when you get around to it.
I'm on it. Right. And fantastic. And thank you very much, sir, for coming on.
Great. Lovely to meet you. Yeah. Bye for now. Bye now.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
All right. Man, this is great. This is, we're just exposing every author and artist tonight that I can possibly think of. So, you could stick around if you want. We're probably going to move on to the next segment, but you could stay as long as you like if you want. Whatever.
I think I'm going to turn in quite soon because it's quite late here.
It's what, midnight a.m.
It's 1 o'clock in the morning, 5 to 1 in the morning now, and it's later than I normally stay up, so I shall probably go to bed soon. But thanks so much. Well, by the way, just out of curiosity, where are you at the moment?
What am I? What?
Where are you geographically located at the moment?
Oh, I am in Tennessee, in North America. I would say southeastern Tennessee. And Ben, you're in Iowa, right?
Yeah, which is almost right in the middle of the country.
Yeah, no, I know. I roughly know where Tennessee and Iowa are. Yeah, no, I was just curious. When I was talking about how the southern states were. Going to have a bad time in my novel. I was thinking, I think I detect a southern accent there, and I was thinking maybe I shouldn't say that. Yeah.
If America were a reality, I would probably be screwed, though.
Yeah. Anyway, I shall say goodbye to you. All the best. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, sir. It was
Thanks for coming.
Thanks. Great. Bye now.
So we got several people lined up, but we got several people lined up for later on, but we got a huge gap of time to fill. And I don't know how long you're going to be able to, stay with me, but I don't know what's going on in your life, Ben.
Not too much. I did want to talk about, so the last week of 2020 decided to take both David Britton and MF Doom from us.
Wait, what now?
The last week of 2020 decided to take David Britton and MF Doom from us.
Are they musicians?
MF Doom is a rapper, and David Britton is was one of the co-founders of Savoy Books and the author of Lord Horror.
You know who? Hey, by the way, thanks for coming, Frank. As you can